All right, it's all over to you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Tinkle. I'm the director of the Writing Center at Johns Hopkins. Let me go ahead and share my screen now. Hopefully, all of you can see this. Okay, great. Yeah, welcome. I'm Robert Tinkle. I'm the director of the Writing Center at Johns Hopkins. Thank you all for attending this workshop. This is sort of intended to help you begin, if you haven't already, begin thinking about sort of how to go drafting your personal statement for really any kind of graduate application. So this is meant to sort of have broad applicability across fields. So whether you're thinking of applying to med school, literature program, history, anything in the humanities, the information here is intended to help you interdisciplinarily across this. So hopefully you'll be able to get something out of this today. And then I'll sort of have I'll have a slide at the very end of this presentation that sort of plugs, I guess, or at least lets you know about sort of the opportunities that you have at the Writing Center. So if you're not already familiar with the Writing Center and what we do, you will be able to sort of learn a little bit about who we're up to. Okay, so the first thing here is, what is a personal statement? Sort of the most basic question that we can ask, but we want to sort of figure out sort of what is actually this document that we are talking about today. So the really important thing, and I'm going to hit on this in a lot of the presentation, is that the personal statement is really your unique opportunity to speak to the admissions committee in your own voice. So, the other parts of your application, for lack of a better term, are a lot of statistical information about you, right? It's your GPA, it's your standardized testing scores, it's your resume, sort of list of activities and things that you've been up to. But your personal statement provides, again, this very unique sort of opportunity to sort of go beyond that, quote unquote, statistical information, facts and figures about yourself, and really begin to have almost like a conversation with the committee. It might feel like a one-sided conversation because it's mostly you talking, right? You're not necessarily hearing their response, but you might begin to think of it as a kind of conversation, or at least an opportunity to sort of share parts of yourself that otherwise aren't maybe apparent or obvious in other parts of your application. And because of that, most admissions committees, as you probably know, quite heavily on the personal statement in their decision making. This because it sort of helps them sift through all of this data, all this sort of statistical information, and really learn something about who you are as a candidate. There's something that sort of comes out of this that they're not necessarily see or get from other parts of your application. Now, for better or for worse, formula to writing these. So there's not sort of a model that you can sort of plug your own information into, and then voila, there's your personal statement. I like to say there's sort of, because this is such a unique document and it's a piece of writing that's about you and your own voice, there are as many personal statements as there are people who can write a personal statement. So so you should encourage you, right? I mean, there's not sort of a there's no sort of answer, I guess, that the admissions committees are looking for. They're really just looking to hear from you. That said, there are effective and ineffective personal statements. So while there is no sort of formula or model, there are, of course, sort of better and worse versions of sort of how to go about doing this. So that's sort of, the talk today is intended to sort of or what some of these more effective personal statements look like, right? And sort of how to avoid a less effective version of this document. And this is really important too. I want you to think of your personal statement as an argument, a piece of writing, right, that is meant to persuade. So a lot of you have probably written essays, over the course of your college career. Personal statement is written very differently than a sort of traditional academic essay. But what it does have in common with an essay is that ultimately it is an argument. You're making a case for something. And so in that sense, you have a kind of thesis statement. And your thesis statement, for all of you who are writing personal statements, is, I belong in this graduate program. You sort of already have your thesis written for you, right? I belong in this graduate program, and here's why. It's kind of a two-part thesis. And that answering that question, here's why, sort of think of as the thesis of your personal statement. So, because your personal statement, you're sharing a lot about yourself with the community, but it's not just a profile of who you are. It's also an argument for why who you are qualifies you, right, to belong in the graduate or professional program that you are applying to. So it's sort of rhetorically as a persuasive kind of document. Say in that it's sort of making an argument or a case for something. Okay, I have this page called some some scary statistics. This is not sort of meant to actually scare you. This is not meant to intimidate you. This is not meant to sort of make you question applying to graduate school. This is just kind of the reality of what the academic job market looks like, what the market for graduate programs looks like. All this is information that you probably are already aware of, but it just kind of helps us get on this page about sort of what we're dealing with here, and out of that, just how important the personal statement really is. So, as you probably already know, many graduate and professional programs receive a quite high volume of applications, and because of that, they're not actually going to be able to admit many, or indeed often most, of the. This is just kind of the reality of applying to graduate school. And this means that candidates who have very high GPAs, very high standardized test scores, whether that's, the GRE, the MCAT, the LSAT, whatever it is you might be taking, in a long sort of impressive list of extracurricular activities, work experiences, research experiences, these candidates still get turned down. And that's just because, again, this is a competitive field. It's getting into really is often a competitive endeavor. So, but the reason candidates often get turned down, in many cases, is because their personal statements are not particularly compelling. So again, this is just to reiterate that the personal statement really is sort of the document that sets your application apart, and that lets you sort of share something about yourself that's maybe more three-dimensional than other parts of your application will. Now that said, there's this kind of paradox, right? That while your personal statement, as we've been saying, is such a critical element of your application, it's also the case that the admissions committee is probably not actually spend that much over it. In fact, they may only read it through really carefully one time, sort of the first time it comes across their desk. And they might look at it again later as they sort of continue to sift through applicants. But the reality is that you sort of write your statement as if, in the back of your mind, remember that the person who's reading is really just going to sort of read it through. They're going to read it carefully, but they're really probably going to just read it through one time. And that's because, and again, you probably know this already, but most of the people who sit on admissions committees for graduate programs, this is not sort of a full-time job. They're not, their job status or their job title is not, admissions committee member. They're often sort of faculty in the department that they're applying to, meaning that they're already sort of, they're tenured professors, they're researching, they're teaching. A lot of the courses that you've probably taken already in your Hopkins career were taught, by sort of tenured professors who also, when application season rolls around, they sit down and they read through these applications. So that's all to say that these people are, they're already very busy. They have jobs that encompass quite a lot of, there's a lot to, right, the sort of job of a working academic. So this is why they only have so much to sort of read through these applications. So they go through them carefully, but often they have a lot to get through, and they've got other things going on. So this is why they might only get through once. These people who are sort of, already working in the department you're applying to, they're sympathetic to you. They're quite sympathetic to you. They want to be able to admit you to their program. But they also do have some tough decisions to make. So that, you need to be as compelling and, again, as persuasive as you can. You want to really sort of be able to hook that first read. So the question that, the admissions committee application and your personal statement is going to sort of ask themselves is this ready, right, for the rigors of this program? Do they have the passion, the drive and the expertise to do well in graduate school, to not only sort of be admitted, but then to sort of go on to thrive in this program and beyond. Scary, stats, the scary situation you may be up against, and this is sort of how to game these scary stats in your favor, and sort of how to approach the personal statement in a way that sort of sets you apart. So given all of this, you want your personal statement to inspire what I call a positive reaction in your reader. So again, we're assuming a reader who's maybe just going to read through your personal statement once. What you want is for them to sort of come away from that statement. You want them to take their eyes off the page after reading that last word and feel confident, right, that you are somebody who has shown an understanding of the field. That they feel like you're ready. They feel like there's a confidence that they can place in you. So you want that sort of positive reaction to be the reaction you get, right, from a sort of a one-time read-through of your statement. You should really let this gut reaction guideline empower you, right? While your statement does need to be polished, you do need to, it does need to be sort of a carefully written, carefully constructed document. you don't have to necessarily obsess over every little word, right? You don't have to obsess like, oh, should I use the synonym? Should I, you want to think of this as kind of a more holistic kind of document, right? This reader's going to read it through probably one time, and they want to come away feeling confident that they have a sense of who you are as a candidate, right? That you've answered that question. Who are you as a candidate? What do you uniquely bring to the table? You want to think in this kind of bigger picture way, right, as you approach this document, and understand and tell you as well that there are no sort of right or wrong answers to these questions, right? The committee is not necessarily searching for a buzzword or something that's going to sort of make or break your statement. What they really want to do is they're really trying to see sort of how you think, right, and how you write. Especially in humanities programs, you do a lot of writing in graduate school, so they want to know that you can write well, you can communicate well, that you sort of show them you can think through your writing, right? So it's more about sort of how you do it, more so than what you actually choose to share or choose to talk about. Obviously, those things are important as well. But you really want to think of this in that bigger picture sense of showing the admissions committee who you are as a candidate and what you can bring to their program. So again, let that kind of holistic approach to this empower rather than intimidate. And be prepared, of course, to revise and revise and revise. So, I would say, you probably should give at least a full month before your application is due to begin drafting a statement, if not even more time. You want to give yourself time to compose multiple drafts. And this is not because this is not a sort of comment on how strong or weak a writer you are. Strong writers need to give themselves time to compose multiple drafts of this. It's a tricky document. It's an important document. So you really, that's something you want to sort of sit down and write the night before. Time to share it with people, to compose multiple drafts of it. And as I say here, be aware that sometimes revising does mean rewriting, right? Revising doesn't always mean going back and sort of word here and comma there. Sometimes it means like really going back to the drawing board and figuring out, okay, how am I going to reconceptualize this thing, and how do I need to rewrite it for vision, right, for this document that I have or that someone else has shared with me. So be aware that it's just me, light edit. Sometimes it's going back to the drawing board and rethinking, either the whole thing or an entire paragraph or two. So again, you really want to give yourself time to be able to do this. Share your drafts, share them with your friends, your advisors, and bring them into the Writing Center. Just to begin to make a quick plug for the Writing Center, the tutor that you're paired with at the Writing Center is probably, of this list of people, probably in some ways the best approximate, right, is actually going to, on the admissions committee, that is actually going to be reading your document, just in terms of their sort of relative anonymity, right? They probably, your tutor probably doesn't know you, you probably don't know that, you don't have a kind of ongoing rapport, so they're able to sit down, read the words that are on the page, right, without sort of the background context of knowing you, and they can really read your statement closer to the way that an admission committee person might be reading this. Of course, your friends can probably give you excellent advice, but your friends also know a certain intimacy and familiarity that you have with your friends. So, when they read your document, they're going to sort of maybe hear your voice in their head. They're going to sort of know why you frame things the way you frame them because they know you, right? You, for example, Writing Center tutor, will be able to maybe see things that even your advisor, and then especially professors on the list as well, because you do want to share your personal statement as well with people who are active in your fields, people who sort of know the trends and the the issues that are sort of live in the field today, who know the culture of this field, right? Your Writing Center doesn't necessarily know that. I mean, we see a lot of, we look at the documents. So, somebody might come in with a personal statement for med school, and then they're going to be followed by somebody who's bringing in a personal statement for, a history program, and then they're followed by someone who wrote a personal statement for, a dental program. So, and of course, we're not experts in all of these fields, so we can do a very good job at assessing your writing sort of as a piece of writing, but people who are like professors can also give you advice, right, that we at the Writing Center might not be able to do. So this is why you want to also give yourself time to sort of share this document broadly, widely, kinds of readers. Okay, now, how do you actually go about inspiring this positive reaction that we're talking about? I'm going to sort of have some do's and some don'ts here, so I'll just sort of run through these. The point is not to show your community that you are likable and interesting, you're a good and deserving, you've been interested subject since childhood or maybe even for your entire life. Now, you might sort of be surprised by this because you think, why wouldn't I want to come? It's like, well, interesting. And I want to show them that I've been interested in this for a long time. And the short answer here is that your committee already knows this about you, honestly. I mean, they can assume this about you to take, the time and the resources and the money, right, to apply to this graduate program. It's very, they kind of already know that you're passionate about this subject, right, that you'd probably be interested, that you've got a lot of interesting things on. So you do want to show, you want these things to sort of come out of your writing, but you don't necessarily want to start here, or you don't want this to be your sort of major, you want this to be your focus. You want things that sort of come out of your statement own, but this is not necessarily the way into the statement, if that makes sense. Rather, the point is to show your community that you're at the ground running on day one, that you're going to be an asset to their program, and you can define asset in a lot of different ways, but you want to show that you're going to sort of, that you have something to contribute to this program, that you have the potential to one day practice and or teach in this field, and so that you're professional and you're experienced and you've been learning, but you're also teachable. Now, what's sort of the difference between this set of sort of 6 and this set? Really, what it boils down to is professionalization. And grad school is all about professionalizing. What I think of grad school really is, to sort of borrow some, terminology from trade schools. Grad school is really kind of an apprenticeship program, right? You're learning how to become an expert at something. When you are an undergraduate, you study very widely, comprehensively, broadly, right? You have courses in, literature, you have courses in the sciences, you might study more languages, right? You're reaching into a lot of different fields. In grad school is very different in that you're really sort of now narrowing the focus. You're really sort of specializing in something. And because of that, this is why you want your to sort of run more in this direction, more so than in this direction. You want to show that you had your major as undergrad, you've already been sort of developing a professional sort of profile in a certain subject, you've already been studying something, particular subject, whatever it is for you, sort of more detail than maybe some of the other things you could have been studying. So you've already begun to do this, right? And grad school is now just sort of amping up even more. So this is why you want your personal statement to sort of show that you are that you're developing, right, a specialty, that you're sort of professionalizing in this way. So whereas the personal statement you probably wrote to get into Hopkins, or you wrote for various sort of undergraduate programs. It was okay to sort of go in this route to show that like, you're really cool, you're really smart, you're interesting, you have all these different interests, right? You've done things, you've shown that you're sort of responsible, you're capable of sort of the rigors of college. So this is okay for applying to undergraduate, right? But for undergraduate school, now more in this direction. So not just that you sort of are capable and intelligent. They already know that about you, right? They want to know that you've sort of begun to really sort of focus on something now. So this is sort of why you want to aim more in this direction in writing your graduate school. The sort of elements of a personal statement. These are things that you want to touch on in one or another. Now, I don't want you necessarily to think of these as like blocks of writing, one paragraph on this, the next paragraph to be on that. These are all kind of elements that sort of come into play over the course of writing your personal. So the first would be sort of formative, academic experiences that you've had, right? So academic experiences that have shown that you are sort of professionalizing expertise in this field. So you might want to reflect in your personal, like, research that you've conducted already, maybe a paper you've published or two, conferences, internships in your field, possibly, courses that you took that were integral to your intellectual development. So this is, these are just examples of ways that you might reflect on, academically, okay, why am I interested in this field? What sort of got me into this? What have I done already? And you also want to then narrow the focus of that to sort of your particular interests or specialties within the field. So, and you want to ask yourself really sort of specific questions here. So what about this field attracts you the most? What do you think you have to contribute to this field? Is there a particular research project you love to take on? These kinds of questions. Now, while your personal statement is a research statement. A research statement is a different sort of type of document where you really sort of go into even more detail about sort of some of the, a set of questions that you can ask, right? About something in your field, something important, controversial, maybe whatever. It's the statement is not quite that, but I think in a grad, you do sort of have some elements of a research statement in there to show that you're sort of thinking about, the issues that are live in your field right now, questions that people are asking, what's really important, right, to this field, what do you potentially have to contribute to that. So reflecting on these kinds of questions, does help you avoid that trap of saying, like say you're applying to an English program. I love literature. I'm reading books since I was, 3 years old, et cetera, et cetera. I'm fascinated by history, and that's why I want to. You want to think more specifically than that, right? About where you actually fit in this field, what you're actually contributing, how you've developed as a kind of, intellectual in this field, whatever that field might be. So again, asking those questions helps you to sort of reflect in a little bit more detail, right? Not just, oh, hey, I love this. What do you find interesting in it? Try to be as specific as you can and reflect on that in your personal statement. The next element then is sort of formative personal experiences, and this is where we draw the word, personal out of personal statement. So this is kind of, all that stuff that sort of got or get, that's actually an important sort of verb distinction there, verb tense. What got you interested in the field, either, in the past, or what continues to get you interested in this field, personal or emotional level, what helps you cultivate and sustain your interest in it. And as I say here, this is kind of, this is possibly the hardest element to really, without sounding sort of corny or cheesy, but when you do it well, it sort of what gives that your personal statement that kind of three-dimensionality, right, or personality that is not necessarily going to come through just from sort of, again, the facts and figures of your application. So again, this doesn't have to be personal or emotional. This doesn't have to be necessarily some dramatic event in your life, right? Some earth-shaking thing that happened to you that made you, oh my gosh, gave you this revelation, right? Or a moment of epiphany, or you went, oh my gosh, now I'm going to study this thing for the rest of my life, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily an event. It can be sort of, where are your personal commitments, right? How does these issues that you want to investigate in sort of the academic, what do they mean to you personally? What is there that sort of, what layers are there to that for you? So it doesn't necessarily have to be, some big climactic. It can also just be, sort of where your interest, why your interests are what they are, and sort of why they get channeled, this that direction. It's a tricky thing to sort of to land on sometimes. Thinking about that and having it come through in your statement really makes for a successful statement. Element is mentors. This is a little bit more optional, but a lot of times in a personal statement, you'll see people either working on, someone who inspired them in the field or instrumental to their passion within it, and or there's someone in the that you're applying to who you'd sort of maybe especially interested in working with, and then for that last sort of feature mentors or sort of someone you're interested in working with, sometimes you don't I don't think have to include you're applying to and the field you're in. Often, you'll see sort of, this will come sort of at the end of the application, even in sort of the final paragraph where you're reflecting, perhaps why you're applying to the particular department that you're applying to, right? Why am I applying to, Vanderbilt as for example, does Vanderbilt have to offer me in this field that that I'm especially excited by, and then sort of in that paragraph you can maybe reflect on, if there are people in that department who you working with. It's a good idea to do this if you can, just show sort of that you've done some research on the department, who's there, sort of what they're working on, and not list their names, but to also be able to account for, to be able to justify, right, why you would want to work with that person. How does their work sort of intersect with yours, inspire yours, etc. Right. So thinking about sort of, what kind of conversations you might be able to have with. Now, this is especially important. So sum all of this up. I know there's a lot of words. To sort of sum up, what you really want to do in this statement is you also want to be thinking about what personal qualities you want to convey. So by personal qualities, I like intelligence, confidence, compassion, maybe sort of a heart for social justice, whatever it is about yourself, right? That you sort of, and this sort of gets to the formative personal experiences category. What is it about yourself, right? To convey. So the personal statement is not just sort of a running tally or a list or a summary of what you've done, but it's also a profile of sort of who you are as a candidate. What I gave a version of this for sort of specifically for people applying to med school and sort of filling out the MCAS. A lot of people you sort of see when they're writing personal statements, especially in school, they'll say, I want to study medicine because I'm compassionate, right? I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse because I am compassionate. And that's obviously compassion is a wonderful thing. But the question there is, there's a lot of right? Firefighters are compassionate, teachers are compassionate. There's a lot of different ways to practice compassion. So beyond just saying I'm compassionate, you want to be able to, why medicine, if you're in med school, for example, why medicine in particular allows you to practice compassion in a way that feels meaningful, right, to yourself, to other people, etc. So this is what I mean. Thinking about this sort of bridge, right? Sort of who you are as a person, what you bring to the table, and sort of be able to shape that into also sort of in a sort of more professional context, right? So not just I'm compassionate or I'm helpful, but also sort of how does that get channeled, right, in the work that I do? So you want to sort of begin to a personal statement about how those things actually sort of come together. Okay. Now, so the next couple slides, I'm going to go over just some sort of common mistakes that I tend to see, or just directions that you maybe want to as you start to compose your own personal statements, directions you want to sort of avoid going in. And the first one is what I call the grand essay, or you can also think of this as sometimes called the memoir. So this is examples that sort of that begin to move in this direction. I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor. I was born to study this, right? Ever since I was young, I've been. Is why I want to apply to your English program, right? This subject has always been my passion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We sort of talked about in some ways, but the first problem with this is that our personal development is always, or usually, a little bit more complex than this. There's not people you might have legitimately a kind of moment of epiphany, right, where something happened. Maybe you were very young, maybe you're in high school, whatever the case may be. Something happened to you, and you went, "Aha! This is the thing that I do with the rest of my life." Some people have that, but not, and there's a sense in which, the personal statement is such a particular kind of genre that I think a lot of people think that they're do that, or they're supposed to have that kind of experience. Like if they haven't really had it, they sort of themselves to have had it, or they sort of make the reader think that they've had that kind of experience. And what I want to tell you now is that you don't need that, right? You don't need this kind of something that happens to you that like put you on this track. The reality is that that's probably for most people probably not how you. It's probably a little bit more complex than that. The second problem with it is that this kind of just ends up being a really kind of grandiose way of telling the committee that you're excited about the subject, right? That's essentially the information you're trying to convey. I'm doing this since I was young, therefore I'm good at it and I'm really excited about it. Before they kind of already know this about you. If you're going to apply to this graduate program in the first place, they already know you're intelligent. They already know that you love the subject. They already know that you're well studied in it. They know that you've been doing this a long time. So sometimes you're again, it's than what they already know. So what you want to do instead is to sort of, and this is actually really important, think more in terms of the emphasis should really be on your present commitments, on your present interest in the field, rather than on this kind of timeline of development or this kind of chronology, right, from the past to today. That will help you, as I say here, to focus on on particulars and on your current commitments and your current investments, rather than on these kinds of bigger picture, grand, sometimes overgeneralized narratives about your life, right? So, I mean, again, of course, you're talking about. It's not just like never talk about your past in the application. You're going to be talking about things that you've done already or things that happened several years ago. But those don't need to be the kind of driving motivators of your statement. Use them kind of as sources to reflect on, right? And sort of think about okay, maybe this thing happened. So now today, what am I doing as a result of that? Still keeping the focus present and who you are now and what you have to offer now, rather than a kind of memoir, right? Of like, okay, this is life, this was the development, and there you go. The committee is much more interested in hearing sort of about who you are today and what you have to offer. So, again, I see some version of this a lot at the writing, this sort of grand model. So we want to sort of move away from that. The second thing is crystal. I don't see this one quite as often, but you do see it sometimes. This is the sort of once I graduate from your program, I'm admitted to your program, I'm going to do this and this and this, right? Sort of having your whole future. The problem with this, and this might sound trite or obvious, but nobody can have a future. You don't know yet where you may end up, and I say that programs are they're quite a commitment, right? A lot of them are 5 years long, 8 years long. You're going to be learning a lot. You're going to be studying a lot, and you're going to be exposed to things right now that they exist or that they're as complicated as you have realized. So in other words, your interests are going to change, and they're going to develop, and they're going to evolve. So you want to, for that, sort of be open to having your interests morph and develop, maybe even completely change. To sort of walk this fine line in some ways of showing that you do have a firm sense of direction, you do know where generally you're headed, but that you're also changing, growing, right, as these many years of grad school progress. So in your application you might say, just sort of now have a word, sentences. You might say, I'm interested in exploring questions that arise from X issue, rather than saying, in this program I'm going to work with so and so and I'm going to study that. Right, so this is, as you can see, this framing is just a lot more definitive. Like, this is what I'm going to do, right? This is sort of more open and saying, this thing I'm really interested in looking at. I think it's cool. This is why I'm interested in it. Right. That sort of it shows, this version of this sort of shows that you have that sense of direction, but that you're still kind of open to maybe other things, right, or to having the change. And the big reason for that is, grad programs, they want to know that you're going to stay. That once they admit you, you're going to sort of stick with them for 5 to 8 years. And so, I think some of the worries that if you have your future sort of so carefully sort of mapped out in every particular, they want to know that, like, if one thing changes, you didn't plan for something, that the whole sort of Jenga tower for yourself is not going to just collapse, right? They want to know that you're sort of flexible enough that if something happens or develop in a different direction, you quit the program, that you're going to stay and you're going to sort of explore that interest. I think that's some of the rationale for why you want. The third mistake, and this is quite common as well, and we've sort of gone over this already, is what I'm calling the glorified resume, right? So this is sort of saying, this is listing your accomplishments. In freshman year, here's what I did, and then sophomore year, I did this, blah, 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 right? Problem is that the committee see your CV and resume, memorize it or rehash it for them. What is emphasize depth over breadth, right? So select as few as one, or even sort of a small handful of particularly meaningful experiences, and that gives you the space in your personal state to sort of reflect on those experiences in detail, to really get into what some of the challenges were for you, what the institution from that looks like. Actually have more of a conversation, right, with the committee, and sort of talk things through in a way that sort of again, reality that we're looking for in this statement. Personal statements are not, most of them on average are a page to 2 pages, single spaced, about a page and a half on average. And that's really, as we've seen through this presentation, there's really a lot of accomplishments in this personal statement. So you simply don't have the space, right, to sort of, the more you share and the more you say, oh, I did this and I did that, I did that, the less space you actually have to talk about one of those in a sort of meaningful way. Typically what I advise is that you don't really have more than, say, experiences that you sort of talk about in your statement. Once you get over 4, talking about a page and a half, 2 pages, you start to run out of room to really sort of say meaningful things about that. So keep it, keep your number of experiences from 1 to about 4. Really try not to go over 4. And remember, as we said on the previous slide, you're trying to convey qualities, show a certain kind of intellectual point of view, rather than simply sort of listing things you did, or this gets back to the first issue as well, the sort of more tendency, right? This is not a memoir. This is sort of a profile of who you are, more so than a list of things that you've done. And the last thing is what I call the damage control. Again, I don't see this too often, but you do see it. These are the sort of moves of saying, my GPA is not as high as I maybe wanted it to be. Here's why I didn't take this an important course in my major until senior year. These explanations, right, for why your record is maybe a little bit funnier or dodgier than you would like it to be. The problem, of course, is that this focuses on negative, right, rather than what you will bring to the program. And furthermore, there's often another section of the application that allows you to explain these kinds of things, tax discrepancies, whatever, your record. So, there's room. Your personal statement, as I've said already, it's a relatively short document. You just don't have the space to kind of to do this. And then, just as importantly, you want to keep the focus again on what you contribute. This is an argument, right? This is a persuasive rhetorical piece of writing intended to convince the community that you belong, right, in this competitive program. So the more time you spend instead of saying, here's why this happened, here's why this my MCAT score is as high as it should be, or my GRE score, the less time you're actually spending on building that case for yourself. So this is why you want to sort of avoid that. Of course, what to do instead, emphasize your strengths and have a clear vision of what you do bring to the table, right? Not what you're missing, but what you have and what you do uniquely contribute. Okay, so instead, that's sort of what not to do. That's, stay away from that. Instead, try the following. Confident, but also curious and persuasive. Of course, you want to avoid without formulate things the committee will have heard before. So it's a really good idea, after you've sort of maybe produced a first survey, ask yourself, I have written this, right? Is this is a little formulaic? Does it sound like maybe I'm to give the committee I think they want to hear, right? Maybe what actually, in reality have to offer, or is it something only I could have produced, right? And if you want that second thing to be true, you want this to read as something that feels like you, is your voice, is you genuinely showing the committee what you do bring, what you do have to offer, right? Not that you're just pushing around for the right word, the thing that you think they want you to say. So ask yourself, does this statement read like me, my individuality and my experiences and my perspective? One way to sort of do this, and more on the nitty-gritty sort of sentence level, is to use active verbs rather than forms of the verb to be. Forms of the verb to be would be I am, you are, he is, etc. So for you might have a sentence that says I am a person. This is what you want to do. Okay, so I mean it's it's great. In this sentence, this person is thinking out sort of maybe what they have, or who they are as a person. They're helpful, they're compassionate. But simply stating that isn't really going to be convincing, right? Remember, this person is their training statement is anonymous. They don't know you. They're just seeing these words on the page. So what this sentence really tells them is that you see yourself as helpful and compassionate, right? Or maybe you want the person reading this to believe you're helpful and compassionate. If they don't see that for themselves, right, in action, then they have to just kind of take your word for it, right? It's not particularly persuasive or convincing to just say, I am, right? Instead, try, I volunteer weekly at my regional care center for the elderly. Wonderful, great. I mean, you can see that by changing this form of to be into a verb, an active verb, right? I volunteer weekly. Here's what I do, right? This demonstrates that this person is helpful and compassionate without ever using those words, without having to say it, right? They chose the specific example over the kind of general statement. The reader, clicks now in the reader's mind as the reader reads this. They themselves can come to the conclusion on their own. Oh, great! This person is helpful and compassionate, rather than just being told that by the writer, right? They can see it for themselves in this example using an active verb. For example 2, this library for me again. No, again, this is just a description. This is just sort of a version of to be, right? We have to sort of take the writer's word for it that that they enjoyed the lab experience and it was exciting, right? But the first question in the reader's mind, of course, is going to be, well, why? What made it exciting, right? We want more particulars. So look at this version of that. I felt confident that I had landed on a new way of approaching this problem. This shows that the lab research was generative and exciting for you without saying that, and it pulls the reader in, right? Look how many verbs are in this sentence. Felt, landed, approaching. Right, there's a lot, and because of that, we as the readers we almost like we're there in the lab alongside this person, right? That we're sort of standing there next to you, watching you find new ways of approaching this problem that you'll then go on to describe, right? So again, these are ways of sort of showing rather than telling. And that's probably a phrase that you've heard many times if you've sort of done any kind of research already. So in other words, always choose that specific detail or the anecdote over the sort of general statement. Showing is greater than telling, and depth is always greater than breadth. So when people say show, don't tell, that's sort of what they mean, right? That instead of just saying something about yourself, I am this or this was that, sort of proving that to the reader, right, through specific examples and through active verbs. And then of course, depth is greater than breadth. This goes back to the glorified resume problem, right? Rather than sort of saying I did this, and this, and then not really having space to elaborate on that, you want to sort of choose a couple of those experiences that were particularly formative or significant for you, and explain the depth and the details of sort of really walking the reader through that experience. So here's some of the big takeaways. This is sort of the last slide. As you prepare to write your statement, really dig deep, right? And ask yourself, and you do that by asking yourself a lot of why questions. So why really, am I interested in this field? Why do I want to pursue a graduate study on this particular topic? Why am I bothering to apply in the first place, right? And the more specific your answers to those questions are, the better, and the more sort of, genuine and meaningful of a personal statement you'll produce out of that. So again, your answers to these questions shouldn't be the answers that you think the committee might want to hear. They should really be your own answers. So really be reflective about that, right? Spend some time thinking and brainstorming and sort of digging deep before you begin to write, in order to sort of generate the qualities that you want to hone in on and experiences that you want to share, interests you want to share, etc. Again, your personal statement is not, you should not think of this really as, it's not a creative writing exercise, right? It's not a memoir, it's not the story of your life. Rather, you need to begin developing a professional profile, right? So this is about you and this is about who you are, sort of in a more professional sort of context, right? And this might sound corny, but it really is, authenticity really is the key to writing an effective personal statement. And this goes back to the point at the top. If you genuinely and frankly and authentically about your actual real experiences, goals, challenges, desires, etc., your voice is going to come through and it is going to be persuasive. Okay, I mean, you might need to sort of, as we've been saying, rewrite, edit. A lot of that will have to still happen, but as long as that kernel of sort of authenticity is there, you're already at least 50% of the way there. You're already very much on track to producing a statement that feels meaningful and actually feels compelling and actually feels like you. Admissions committees have seen it all, but they've never actually seen you, right? And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning, that there are as many personal statements as there are people to write them, right? That's because everybody has their own voice. So this is why authenticity matters. This is what sets you apart. This is what gives your personal statement that kind of three-dimensionality that the committee is looking for, and how they come through when you're writing, right? That they sort of feel like there's a person behind all of these stats and all of these sort of facts and figures. Okay, so finally I will leave you. This is just a quick sort of Writing Center infographic. We are at the Writing Center open this summer. We're actually reopening. We've been sort of closed a couple weeks since the end of spring semester, but we are reopening this Monday, the 24th, and we'll be open through the end of July. Our hours are Monday to Thursday, 2 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. So if you might not be on the East Coast right now, so just remember that we're still sort of on Baltimore time. We are sort of remote through the summer, so we're by Zoom or over the phone. So wherever you are in the world, you can reach us. If you're not familiar with Writing Center already, this is a really great opportunity for you to, and this is a free service, so it's included in your tuition, to sort of come in. You can bring in any piece of writing, including a personal statement. And you really have the opportunity then to sit down with one of our trained tutors, one-on-one, and receive up to 50 minutes long. So what happens is you bring in your writing, your tutor will sort of read through it in the first 10, 15 minutes of your appointment, and then spend the rest of it really dialoguing with you about what's working, what could be improved on. So it's a really fantastic opportunity to receive very specific, tailored to you, one-on-one feedback about your writing. And again, we look at personal statements, so please do bring those in if you have them. And we let make up to 3 appointments on any given draft, so we can see you multiple times and personal statements we can fudge that a little bit. So knowing that this is sort of a process, right? We're not necessarily counting. So if you want to sort of 4 or 5 appointments, we can maybe accommodate for a personal statement. And you're welcome to sort of work with the same tutor. If you want to request somebody you have, that's really great. You're welcome to work with 3 different people. If you want like multiple sets of eyes on your draft, it's up to you. So if you're an undergrad, you can make appointments through Blackboard, visit Starfish. There's a Writing Center page. You can sort of sign up that way. If you're maybe a master's student or a recent alum, you won't have Blackboard access. You can just shoot us an email at writingcenter.jhu@gmail.com, and we will be happy to set you up with an appointment. Okay, I think that's my time. I think I've been a little bit over time, so I will take us off there, and I'll have them anything you might want.
Well, first off, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was a great, this was great, like so much information in a very short amount of time, so I definitely empathize. So we have a couple of questions, and we'll take the next 5 minutes to get through as many as possible, if that sounds okay. Sure. Great. So the first question we have was, how do we convey the items on the do list that you showed without straying too far into the do not list? Do you have some like tips on balancing that?
Yeah, so it's all just, I take the question to be, how do you talk about your experiences and things, not just sort of sounding like a resume. It's all sort of how to present the material. So it's not just, the emphasis should not just I did, here's like the running list of like my job description, it's sort of what you want to reflect more on sort of what you got out of it. And these are things that don't appear on your resume. Your resume will show like what you did in your job, what your job description looked like. In your personal statement, you have the opportunity to sort of talk about and reflect about the challenges you faced, right? The insights that you sort of derived from experience, what you learned from it, what you can sort of bring with you forward. So we're looking at those kinds of details that aren't just what you did, but sort of what you got out of it, right? Is really the direction that you want to head in. To extract, sort of, okay, I did this thing, whatever it might be, research, whatever, took a class. How is that going to be moving forward? What did I learn from this class? What did I become interested in as a result of this research? That sort of informs, who I am as a candidate and sort of what I'm going to be interested in moving forward. So reflecting on those kinds of more, and again, those are personal, right? They're personal. 2 people can do the same job and get completely different things out of it, right? So reflecting on sort of what you got out of it personally is really important, and what will sort of make that a compelling paragraph or section of your statement. It doesn't just sound like a resume.
Covered this in more detail towards the end of your presentation, but do you mind like giving us the quick summary on like, how do you best communicate like how you got interested in the field without like it turning into some of those like, common mistakes that you see? If there would be like you in a student's head, like saying this one line over and over again, like what would your advice be there?
It depends. Like I said, really do have that kind of epiphany moment where you have like a dramatic or climatic kind of experience that really did motivate them to do something. That's great. And I think if that really did happen to you, the way, again, it's all about what you talk about it. The way you talk about it will feel convincing and it will feel real, right? If you're sort of as reflective about it as you can be. If you didn't have that experience, you're thinking about, broader sort of, more sort of intangible sort of commitments that you have to the field, or, ways that, with an example off the top of my head, but what I'm thinking of, a lot of times, like, for example, people that are writing personal statements for medical school, you see very often, the sort of trope saying, when I was very young, it's usually a family member, right? My parents got very ill, I saw the way that the nurses took such good care of them, and at that moment I knew I was going to be a doctor. My grandma got better, yay. You see that very often, and that probably is, genuinely a lot of people's experience, but at the age of 4 or 5, then that you were going to be a doctor, that would have been like the very beginning of a chain of events that led up to that, certainly. Maybe that is true, but that doesn't tell the admissions committee much sort of who you are today, right? And like what your commitments in the field really look like now, and sort of what you have in the field now. So you really want to sort of, even if your sort of origin story, it's not to say that like, oh, I doubt that happened. It could have happened, but the admissions committee wants to know more about sort of how that brought you to where you are today. Things look like for you now. So that's, again, the present really needs to be your focus.
I know we had a few more questions, but we're ending on time.
Yeah, I'm trying to run 5 minutes over.
Oh, no worries. So real quickly, if students like who maybe posed a question would want to get in contact with the Writing Center, what's the best way to do that? Like in the email you provided?
Those are tinkle1@jhu.edu. So yeah, you can just shoot me a message and I'd be happy to answer that question for you.
Awesome. I'm putting that in the chat real quick. Well, thank you so much. This was a very informative presentation. And starting at 2 p.m., we're going to have 2 more sessions coming up. The first is going to be what goes through a graduate admissions committee's mind. So some of those questions you had today on like how things would be perceived, feel free to pose those in that session. And then we're going to have another session led by me on how to create a CV. And this is really going to be oriented to if you're, starting to craft an academic CV. And I know we had a question on gaps in experiences. So feel free to pose that question there. So thank you so much thank you so much for today. And we'll see you at the next session. Enjoy your bio breaks, water breaks, whatever. And we'll see you at 2. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you so much. It stopped the recording and broadcasting.